Thank you. Sorry. He will share with us an insight on the results of his research about global academic knowledge production and the very actual changes we are living today. So the floor is yours.
I need that one. So thank you for the opportunity for being here. I will do the presentation in English, so everybody can speak English. It's better because puedo hablar un poquito español, pero tengo un poquito de vergüenza, pues mi español no es muy fluente todavía. Pero si tienes algo, creo que yo puedo traducir si es necesario. So, yeah, as Juliana told you, I'm from Hungary. That is, I don't know if you know anything about Hungary because it's a very little country, but it's important because we are in a very peripheral position in the global academia. So first I started to study communication and media studies, and I have my PhD in communication studies and then my habilitation in international relations. But the point is that I started to work on global inequalities in the academia because it's part of my life story. Because when I finished my PhD, and it was a very successful defense, I was selected as one of the most talented scholars in Hungary. I'm the youngest university professor in my field. So I thought that I can do research, right? But in a given point, it became mandatory to publish internationally. And then I tried to send my papers to international journals, and all of them was rejected with a very, very bad review. They told me that I don't know anything about methodology, that I don't know anything about my profession, that I'm not familiar with the literature, so basically that I'm a very bad scholar. And all my papers were rejected from the first round, and I was just super, super surprised. How can it be that I have my PhD, I have everything, I published a lot in Hungary, and I don't know anything about research and about my field? So then I started to investigate this issue, because what can we think? That maybe we are all stupid people that are not living in the Western world, or training or education is that bad that we cannot do meaningful research? What happens in my country? So then I started to do investigations. And I also have a story. So I learned how to do international research because I started to work in international teams. And I realized that it is a strategy. It's not about knowledge. It's about a strategy. How do we have to face the requirement of international journals? And then I wrote a paper in which I analyzed the science production in, I think, in 20 journals. And the review was fatal. They told me that the sample is very small and the analysis is very superficial and all the paper is a shit. But in the next year, I realized that in the very same journal, an American professor published a paper in which he analyzed 20 journals, so half the sample that I have, and the analysis was very superficial. And I was wondering how my data set was little and his were perfect, maybe because he's an American professor. And then I contacted with the editor, who was very supportive with me, and I told me that if I analyze 500 journals, I can publish. So I dedicated a year to analyze 500 journals, and actually my paper was accepted in the journal. But you can see that I had to do 100 times more effort in order to be published, because I was a no-name scholar at that time in a no-name country. So then, for me, it was super interesting, and also it was a challenge to make my research visible. And in a couple of years, I became one of the most productive researchers in my field. So I was amongst the top 10 in Europe and the top 20 worldwide in my discipline. That was at the time communication and media research. So I realized also that it is not impossible to be visible, but you have to learn the strategy. And from this time, I started to provide mentorship, first to individual colleagues, and then to universities to raise their level of visibility. So now I'm in head of the Office for Science Strategy in my university, and we provide mentorship for the people who want to publish international journals, because now it is mandatory even in Hungary. So if you want to be a full professor, you need 2 papers in the journals that has an impact factor. So impact factor is something that is like the quality of the journal. I'm not believe that it is actually the quality. It is a hierarchical position in the global science production. And I'm editorial board member in more than 10 international journals with impact factor right now, and we are very selective. So in a very good journal, like for instance, the American Journal of Sociology or New Media and Society, they accept only 2% of the papers. So it's very extremely hard to be published there. But once you publish, your papers will be cited, and all that scientometric stuff will be better. So, and my experience is that we can teach 90% of the people to publish. So actually, eventually, if they follow our advices, and we can revise and check the papers when they are developing, actually they will be published. So it's not impossible, we just need some support. But still the system is very unequal, and we have many imbalances and very biased. So I think it's a very interesting topic for several reasons. So some basic questions. In the philosophy of science, that is a huge discipline, so I can't even give a summary. But the main point is, especially for natural scientists, that science is something uniform, something international, something objective. So science is something that you can reproduce. Science is something that have very objective methodologies, and if you follow that, you make science. If you don't follow that, you don't make science. It's like sometimes they compare it with religion. So in religion, I don't say, and especially in social sciences, they don't say that religion doesn't tell something, but this is not science, because it's transcendental. That is the fact that in religion you have to rely on stuff that you can't check, actually. You have to rely on stuff that you can't see or hear, no empirical evidence. You have to believe it. And in the philosophy of science, they say that in science you don't have to believe. So you have the data, you have the empirical analysis, everything is transparent. You can repeat the whole process to see if a given research is true or not. So this is basically the modern consideration of science. Of course, there are very challenging ideas, especially in postmodern science, and especially in the sociology of science. We don't think that. Myself, I don't think that science is objective. But this is that the positivist view of the philosophy of science think. Why science is important? Because, you know, it's part of the education. So in developed countries, all the universities, you have to learn science without questioning. Of course, in the courses, with your professors, you can discuss, you can challenge the ideas, but eventually you have to do an exam in which you have to show that you learned the books, the text, the lectures. So you somehow have to be comfortable with the fact that knowledge at the university is connected to science. So basically at university you can teach religion or magic or I don't know. So also art has its own part of knowledge, but art is not science. especially if you consider fictional artwork like a novel, it seems like it's about reality, and if it's a kind of reality, but you can check it. You can check Romeo and Julieta. You can check fictional works. So this is also something that you can learn at the University of Fine Arts or University of Art, but not in a normal research university. So I think this is why not just researchers, but also students should be aware what is happening at the university. And if you check your books, I don't know exactly the situation in the Spain, but in Hungary and also in the US and in many countries, if you check your textbooks, they are written by American or no, even if they are translated. In Hungary, all the works of sociology, we use Anthony Giddens, that has all the American traditions. And if you check the gender, for instance, all are male professors from the US. It's very rare. It would be weird to see a textbook in Europe in which there are papers from African female scientists or Latin American female scientists. It's not typical. All we learn is the production of male Western, typically American professors. And we consider, and I think that normally the teachers or the professors won't tell you that it is just a part of the knowledge, a very small part of the knowledge, because in China, in Asia, in Japan, in Africa, in Latin America, in Eastern Europe, there are also professors that write books that have the conception of the word, but you will never heard about them. You will heard about the American tradition normally. And I think so in sociology, it's very typical. What is worse? Even if we have people from the global south, that includes Africa, Latin America, Asia, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, there are some names. I had an investigation in decolonization studies, but in decolonization studies, all the people that are famous now live in the US. And they are trained in US universities. Believe me, I made an empirical research a few years ago to check these people, and all of them were trained in the US, now live in the US for decades. They are not really, I would say, not authentic voices of their own world regions, because now they are in a very different cultural and academic context. So it's funny and a little bit annoying that you can't really hear authentic voices in the international science, because in order to be heard, first you have to go to the center. So I was a very productive researcher, and still my colleagues that were working at the UK, for instance, they always told me to repeat my PhD in an English university. If I want, nobody will care about what I say. But I wasn't willing to do that, because at that time I had a very influential book, many papers in my very little field, that is academic knowledge production. Everybody knows my name. Why do I have to go back to school, start to do my exams, start to do exams in front of assistant professors half my age? This is something that I just didn't want to do. But I faced the consequences, because once you send your CV, for a position in the Western world, the first thing they will check is your education line. So if you have a PhD from Oxford, you will most likely have a job in a good university. Then if you don't have it, but you have a very nice publication record, they won't really care about that. So it's all about prestige. So the system is very biased, and this is why I start to use Bourdieu, because Bourdieu has a very deep theory regarding the symbolic capital, and your PhD or your degree is your symbolic capital. So if you have, it doesn't, especially nowadays, everybody uses AI, I never used anything in my research that I learned in Hungary. So normally, the classical way of education is not existing nowadays. So you can learn the very same stuff that you can learn in the US or in China. Because you use artificial intelligence, you can do the prompts in Chinese, you can have an access to the same literature, same academic literature than your peers in Harvard. So now I think all the elite universities have is their prestige, because the knowledge is not better. I can publish in the same journals than my Harvard colleagues, because we use the same literature, we use the same methodology. If you don't understand anything, AI or ChatGPT or Claude can explain you how to do that. It can write you the exact codes to do the analysis. If you put an Excel file, it can do the analysis. So I think there is not I can't imagine a knowledge in social sciences that exists in the US and I can't reach it, because it's not happening anymore. For a few decades ago, yes. So you had to go to the professors that had the knowledge. You had to go to universities that has access to the journals, to the relevant literature. But now the field is totally different. So all the universities has is money and prestige, I think. Maybe natural science is not that much, because they have the equipment that can be very costly. So, in the majority of social sciences and art and humanities, it's all about prestige. And also the same for the journals. So another part is academic writings. I don't know if you have a course on academic writing here, the university. So normally they teach the Anglo-Saxon way of producing papers. That is simply a rhetoric. It's all about the structure of the paper and the rhetorics. Doesn't have anything about knowledge. So when I read, and it's very, very super boring. So the Anglo-Saxon way of writing, I always review papers written by the most famous scholars in my field, submitted by the best journals, like the Journal of Communication or Communication Research, and they are super boring, but super safe. So if you write the paper in accordance to the requirements of the journal, the paper will be super, super boring, but it will be published. And this is why I actually very, very like to read papers from Spain and from Latin America, because they have a very different, also from French. In French, I had a presentation about the same topic, and my colleagues in Sorbonne told me that in France is a very different academy. They don't have to publish in international journals. You can be a full professor without having any papers in international journals. And what they want is to have your own voice. So if a scholar is very characteristic, then it's a good scholar. In Latin America, my experience is that the papers are very critical, very connected to society, full of philosophy, full of requirements how to change the world, which is very exciting, but you cannot publish that in an international journal, meaning an international journal with impact factor that is most likely published in the US or the UK, because in my field, I think 95% of the journals that are indexed in the Web of Science are published in the US. And they don't understand. If your reviewer will check your paper, what they want to see is that this is super appropriate with the academic writing process that were developed in the UK and the United States. And this will so AI will kill all the system. I think that because in the Anglo-Saxon way of writing, what you need a literature review, a very, very objective one. You can't add your opinion. You just have to summarize what past research show. And then you need to collect data, be very, very transparent about data collection, about your research methodologies, and in the discussion section, you have to apply your empirical results to the literature review. So basically you have to show that in your research what is in agreement with past research and with what is the difference. So now this is something that AI can do much better than us. So if we will stick to this way of science that we do for decades now, it will be the end of human science, because now I use AI for everything. Everything is better than my postdocs. If I want to develop papers, I always use AI, because this is what exactly it does. So just collect millions of papers, do the, like with the tokenization, it does the statistical analysis, I would say. So it's all about probability. It's not about logics. AI doesn't follow any logic, it's just probability. But this is perfect for the recent system, because what they want is to check the most influential literature, and which is the most influential literature that you can find easily, that are cited more. And this is, it is the statistical stuff that AI actually does. Check the papers that have the most impact, do the summary, you can prompt, you can ask it to do the similarities between papers and the contradiction between papers, and to find a niche. A niche is something that is not discussed in the literature right now. And this is also something that the AI can find very professionally. And then, when you have the data, the AI can do for you the analysis. Right now you have to double check everything, because it makes several mistakes, but of course it will be developed in a very fast pace. So in a few years it won't make more mistakes that humans does. So, and then the discussion very easy with the AI, because you just have to ask, now use my empirical results and contrast it with the literature that you have already written in the theoretical framework part. And your paper is now. So now I'm in several panels, international panels, funding panels like ERC, and we have in Portugal, in Hungary, in Poland, very similar systems for research funding. And it was super amazing this year. I would say that 95% of the proposals were written by AI, totally. Even in the category of excellence, the advanced category, where the proposals are written by internationally leading scholars that have not 60 years old, or sometimes 70 years old, they started to use AI. So all the proposals, actually almost all the proposals, were written in AI. And when you check 20 proposals, you can see it very easily that the same structure, the same wording, the same questions, the same methodology, everything is the same, so they're very uniform. And we don't have tools, actually. So maybe you know that we don't have tools to show that the text is written by AI. Of course, we have Zero GTPT and all the stuff, and Turnitin, but you can't justify, not legally. So if students write the dissertation with AI, you can do anything. If all the journals state that you can't use AI in your research, or you have to report if you use AI in which parts of the text, in the analysis, in the discussion, but you don't have to do that because they can't justify. Many times I received reviews that were written totally by AI, and I told the editor, and they told me they can't justify. So it's just like something that you either follow or not, and now I think everybody in the academia, not just the students, but also scholars, use AI infinitely. And it has its consequences, and I will talk about that later. So now a little bit about the sociology of science. I believe in the sociology of science, so I would say that science is just a construction of humanity, with all its bias. So science is not something that is external to humanity. It is something that we produce. And another little story. I started in sports. So my career was in sports, but I realized that it is unfair, especially in the sports that like in dance, for instance, when they give points. it's very biased, it's not objective. Then I went to arts, and in arts nothing is objective. So if you, especially in Hungary, if you are in the network, you will be successful. If you are outside the network, you don't have chances. I was trained in the art of cinematography in Hungary when they accept 10 students in every 2 years. And there are more than 10,000 students who apply. So it's very super selective. And in my class, I was the only one in my class that don't have family members that are already very successful, directors, cinematographers, actors. I was the only one. And all the students, the others, were not more talented than the 2,000 other students they have. And for me, I was an outsider. The other students didn't speak to me. They speak to each other about how is your father? Yeah, super, I have seen it. And when the process was very, very, very long, the process of the application. So we have 5, 6 rounds of applications, interviews, you have to produce movies, you have to show that you can cut a movie and so on and so forth. And all the students were communicating with the professors in the procedure. I didn't know anybody. So I realized that art is not something for me because it's impossible. And yeah, I made a little bit problematic stuff that I was married very, very young and I had children, so I had to make some money. And I realized that in arts, it's impossible. If you are not part of the network, you are fucked. So then I went to science because I thought that science is something that is meritocratic. Okay, if you produce better research, your reputation will be better and you will get a job and so on and so forth. No. No. At least in Hungary, I don't know anybody, I don't know a single professor that has its position competitively. Of course, we have to advertise because it's legally mandatory. So we always advertise positions, but first time I applied, my professor was laughing. Are you stupid? What are you doing? Nobody applies for jobs if you are not already in that position. Because it's impossible to get a job without already having it. And believe me, I had 5 positions in the academia, but I was always already in the position when they started to advertise that. So it's all about, I have a team right now, about 20 people in my office, and all the people were invited by me. They were advertised the positions, but it's impossible to get a position without being part of the network. So this is why I say science is not better than other subfield of society. They say, of course, that they are meritocratic, but check the Harvard. How many students are students of the people who pay big money for the university or alumni of the university? In Hungary, I know many students that are trained in Oxford and Cambridge, but first you have to go to an institution that is called Milestone Institution. It's very super expensive. Nobody can pay for that. But if you are trained in Milestone Institution that has very good connection with Cambridge, Oxford, Durham, all the elite universities of the UK, you can go. And the parents are very on Facebook and Instagram all the time. Oh, my children now is a student of Oxford University. But they never write that first I had to pay €500,000 for the training. So science is not better than any other subfields. It's all about networks, all about connections, all about prestige, all about the elites that organize everything and that has a very super powerful control over everything. another little fact is, I don't know if you are familiar with the peer review process. So first you send your paper to a journal, the editor decides if it will, if he will or she will send it for external peer reviewer. That is theoretically double blind. What does it mean? That the reviewers don't know who is the author, but the editor knows, for instance, and the decision is always in the hand of the editor. So first time I sent a paper to the Journal of Communication, that is the leading journal of my field, the editor sent it to peer review and I received 5 very positive reviews. And I was totally sure that the paper will be published. And then the guy rejected the paper, stating that, yes, although all the reviewers were positive, but they are not too positive. Okay, so actually the editor can say what he or she wants. If you have, because all the reviews are the following, the positive and the negative side of the paper, and the editor can decide if he focuses on the positive comments or the negative. So with the same review, the very same review, the editor can say, although the paper has positive parts, actually the reviewers find weakness in the paper, so it's rejected. But with the same review, they can say, although the paper has some weaknesses, basically it's very interesting and has strong parts, so if you do some revisions, we can publish. And they make an empirical research, they made an empirical research with which the same paper was sent to the same journal to review, but in the first case they say that this is from a Harvard professor, the other case they say this is from a professor from Africa, and of course the African paper were rejected, the American paper were accepted, despite the paper was the really same. So the system is very, very, very super biased, and it's not all about merits, it's not all about the merits of the paper, but about the reputation of the author, which is very sad, but true. So in my former works, and this is the mainstream conception, that we have a world of international science in which we have a center, that is the Western world, typically the US, the UK, and some European countries. And in order to be part of the system, you have to follow the culture, the logic, the theories of the Western scholars. And this is more or less true, and this is true for not just individual researchers, but also for research groups, universities, journals, and whole countries. So if a country wants to be visible internationally, it has to raise the number of papers in the international journals. And actually I think this is what happened in Spain with ANECA. So in my field, communication, Spain now amongst the 3 most productive countries in the number of papers. So when a country decides that it needs international visibility, it has to start publish papers in international journals. And this is what happened in Eastern Europe, in Poland, a little bit in Hungary, because rankings, university rankings became very important. And these rankings are based on international databases. So there are different kinds of rankings, but most likely they use Scopus or the Web of Science when they calculate with the visibility of the university and also with the impact of the university that is measured in citations. So it's a very important interest of the universities if they want to be ranked in good positions, if they want international scholars that pay a lot of money, then they have to raise their level of visibility in international journals. So basically, we still have, now it's an illusion because of China, and I will talk about China more. So now this is an illusion, but still the majority of countries thinks that we have a uniform system of science, or with leading positions of internationally recognized countries like the US and some European countries, and we have to follow the norms. Yeah, and I think more or less right now this is the situation, because if you want a position in Harvard, actually you have to do your PhD in Harvard, and you have to publish papers in the best international journals. You have to publish books in international leading publishers, and you don't have the option to publish in Spanish, because if your publication list is in Spanish, most likely you won't have a position in a Western university outside Spain. And of course the language is also very important, so you will need a very good command in English, especially in writing, because yeah, it's difficult. The reviewers will see if you are not from the US, if your paper is not very perfect. So now in my office we have native proofreaders, because even if you can speak English, even if you have a certification of C2, it doesn't matter, because you will never have a native level of English. So this is why we always need a native proofreader to make the paper look like it is written by an American scholar. Otherwise, it will be rejected in the first round. So yeah, maybe I will skip some of the parts of the model because it's a bit complicated. Yeah, this is just a very short list of the difference between the core and the periphery. So the core position is very visible in different parts of the system, like in publication output, in editorial boards. There are journals in my field that never published anything that were not from the United States. Like in my case, it's communication theory. The most important theoretical journal of the field. You can't publish anything if you are not American. In journals that are empirical, you still have some chance. But this is the hierarchy. I would say it's an epistemic hierarchy. It's very, if you are African and you put some African data into a Western theory and you work with an American professor as a co-author, you have a chances. But in this case, your country is the subject of data only. So you can be a data provider, and then an American professor will write a paper based on your peripheral data. But this is not epistemic legitimacy. I would say it's almost impossible. It's not totally impossible, but it's almost impossible to publish a Hungarian theory of communication in an international journal, because it's not accepted. I had the opportunity to do that. So now the communication theory of my professor is published in one of the most important books of the International Communication Association, because they already know me. And it was my present for my professor, who had 80 años. It was my surprise to him that now your theory is in the official book of communication theory of the International Communication Association. Of course, nobody will cite it ever, because it's a Hungarian theory. A very good one. I think it's the best theory in communication right now, because my professor is a very good philosopher who developed a very philosophical theory of communication. Nobody understands the word because it's full of mathematical logic, and it was impossible to publish anything based on this theory. But yeah, so theoretically in the field of social sciences, I think it's almost impossible to publish a theory of your own country. You can publish data if you follow the analysis of the Western tradition, but still you remain peripheral that provide data for the very clever American professors. Yes. Yeah, it's from my research. Yeah, I have a paper that is very influential in the Journal of World Systems Research, and yeah, actually this is a model that combines Wallenstein World System analysis with the Bourdieusian field theory. So Your title is, it's my paper, but the word systemic dynamics of knowledge production in social sciences, I think.
But in the information about the seminar, you have the link to his profile, and I think.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And also in editorial boards, in selection committees, publishing house, everything. So in international grants, you know ERC, this is the biggest grant of the European Research Council. And what do you think, how many proposals are accepted in percents? How many are accepted from the newcomers of Europe, so the Central Eastern Bloc? How many percent of the grants are win? We have less than 2%, 42, 1.8%. So it's almost impossible, because in the panel there are scholars from the Western world that follow super different traditions. And now ERC comes to Central Eastern Europe to make seminaries on how to do research, but it's a bit, it's paternalistic. And that's why I applied in Spain. So now I'm finalist in ERC, so maybe I will win an advanced grant. But I applied from Spain, because from Hungary it's impossible. Now, but no one. There are
Spain is
better, a bit better than Hungary.
International.
Yeah. So because in Complutense they manage many ERC, and the panel will believe that the university can manage. In Hungary, we have only one guy who won an ERC. He was 70 years old, and he never lived in Hungary. So he was Hungarian by nationality, but he lives in the US, and he's a superstar it's Viktor Karadis, a very famous sociologist. He lived all his life but he's Hungarian, so no, it's impossible. Even if it's not a condition so they exactly and clearly say that the host institution doesn't play any role in the decision, but actually yes. So we have Hungarians and Polish people who won ERC, but they all applied in international universities. So yeah, and actually in Spain there are very good initiations to mentor. So we have mock interviews, we have real training. So I understand why it's easier to apply from Spain, because here there is Madrid Plus and also another association that trains people who apply for ERC, and they were very super, I would say, useful. So it's not bullshit training, it's real training. So yeah. And these are some data about the publications of in several disciplines. So you can say that the Global North publishes 8 times more paper than the Global South, including China. Now in this diagram, it's including China. And in several disciplines, it's close to 0. So like Eastern Europe publishes actually nothing in communication. It's basically Western Europe and the United States that publishes 90% of the papers, sometimes in some discipline 95%. Yeah, so the global contribution of the Global South is almost impossible. And even if we can publish, we normally publish with international scholars. So the majority of my papers are written in cooperation with American, Spanish, English, Japan, so on and so forth people, because it's also more likely that your paper will be published if the paper is international in terms of the contributors. Yeah, this is about the PhD degrees. So we made an investigation in sociology. We checked 100 departments of sociology based on the based on the ranking positions. So 100, we analyzed more than 2,200 lecturers, assistant professors, associate professors, full professors. What do you think, how many professors that actually works at the top 100 sociology department of the world, how many professors we find without a Western PhD? Amongst the 2,200 professors who work at the top 100 sociology department, how many were without an elite PhD? 10? 0, yes. It was 0. There were a lot of researchers without publication excellence, but without prestigious PhD, no one.
You mean Western PhD?
Yeah.
Whatever Western, or this is pretty flexible?
I would say 99% from the US and the UK.
Okay.
There were some from the University of Zurich, Amsterdam also, because some Western European, but nobody from the Global South, no one from the Global South. Like,
And also, but the 100 top departments were also in those countries. Most likely.
not all of them. There were some in Western Europe, yeah. No, see, yes, the department themselves were in the Western countries, of course, yeah. But they always say that they are very international. I was working in SOAS, University of London, that is very decolonial one. It was a decolonial. And if you just check the people in the department, it was very diverse. African, Asians, Middle Eastern people, yes. But if you check the curriculum, all of them had the education in England, in the UK, most likely in the same university, the University of London. So they are not Africans, Asians, Middle Easterns in terms of education, in terms of academic culture. So it is just, now it's a little bit different because China has several very good universities. So I can imagine that in specific disciplines you can get a position in the US if you have your PhD in computer science, for instance. So I would definitely recruit someone from the University of Beijing who has a PhD in computer science in the US, because I think Chinese universities, there are more than 20 universities in the top 100 right now. So China is, right now it's not the part of the Global South. It was all, for me, it was always funny to say that China is part of the Global South, but this is something that theoretically most people say because the per capita GDP is low. But in terms, I was in Shanghai last year and I couldn't realize that this is Global South. No, it was the future. The money they have is just amazing. So,
it's a world in itself.
yes, yeah.
It's a very-
Yeah, and they told me that they pay me my ERC. The ERC is a big money, it's 2.5 million euros. And I wanted a partnership in the University of Shanghai, and they told me, forget ERC, we will pay. But you have to live 3 years in China without coming back. And this is something I don't want, no. Because they are very kind for me as a visiting professor, but if you live there, it's a different story. So with my lifestyle, no. No, but what they have is money. So I think now I would go for the Chinese, the AI part. So I think AI will change the whole world of the academia. It's a very deep story, because like I told you, now we all use AI for research. Everybody say that I never used. I have a PhD student. Either he is stupid or thinks that I'm stupid. I think the latter. He thinks that I'm totally stupid. He writes everything in AI and always told me that, always simular que I told him that, okay, let's learn how to use it properly, because how you use ChatGPT is a mess. So it's nonsense. I see that you use it all the time, that let's learn how to use it. And he pretends that, okay, what is the URL? How can I have never tried. Always plays that game with me. But I know that he writes everything in ChatGPT because it's my field of research, so I can realize in 2 lines that you use that. That are very okay, so now everybody uses that, but everybody say that, no, I don't use. Actually, we had an experiment with students. One part could use AI, one part couldn't use, and with AI they did, it was very complex because we also contrasted the data with the former production of students. But there is no connection. So there are students that has very low grades but can work with AI very effectively, and there were students with who was the best students of their classes, but they did very wrong work with AI. So it's very combined, it's a different mindset. So there are people who understand how to use AI properly, even if they are not good students. So there were no real connection with the former production of the students and the output of their essays that they write with AI. So it will change, it's a different cognitive mindset, I would say, and it will also change everything. It's not just in assessment, and the universities right now don't know how to handle the situation. So what is happening at the universities, I think it's a nonsense, because everybody uses AI. You can't detect it, or even if you detect, you can't justify. There is a very severe difference between students' capacity to use AI properly. So I would say AI will change everything, and the question is what we will do in the future. And I don't know the answer, so we have to, if we will stick to the recent system of the academia with the Anglo-Saxon way of writing, with the methodologies that we need, with the so-called objectivity of academic research, then the generative AI will replace us in a few months or in a few years. So I think my opinion is that we might want to go back to the Greek way of teaching, with mentorship, with personal contact with the students, with more time for make them understand personally stuff, and we have to put the emphasis more on the human values, because actually what ChatGPT doesn't have is the humanity. So if we can somehow teach humanity, it would be valuable. But right now, academia is everything, but not humanity. So if you, because the main conception for decades in the academia is that the author is not important, only the content. So you can give your opinion, you can give your humanity, you can give your values, your ideas into the paper in the Anglo-Saxon way of writing, because it will be rejected. So this is a very, very severe problem right now, because if you consider it as a general rule, you can't say that AI can't write the paper, because if the author is not important, why AI can't be the author? And I just reviewed the paper, a very interesting one, in which researchers reproduced the whole academic process with AI, starting with the research idea, and then with data collection, and then with the analysis, and then with writing the paper, and then they sent it to AI peer review. So the peer reviewers were also AI, and then AI selected the best papers. It made the review, the revision, and also the second round of review, the revision. AI decided which papers they accepted, and then they did the presentations for conferences with animations, with everything. They selected the best presentations for the conference, and all the process were conducted by AI. So we are not needed in the process anymore. or if we are needed, we have to change everything that we think about right now on research, or education, or research excellence, and the publication system, because in this case we don't need the publications anymore, because AI can find everything without writing individual papers. So what is happening right now is China. So for decades, China's policy was to be in parity with Western science, and they paid a lot of money for researchers to publish in international journals. The two most excellent or prestigious journals is Science and Nature. And for 5 years, China paid $1 million if you published in Nature. And now the Nature Index of China is higher than the Nature Index of the US. And in the international databases, now China publishes more than the whole Western world. In specific disciplines like computer science, semiconductors, chemical engineering, they publish 5 times more than the US. And then they realized that they can do something different. So since 2022, the Chinese research policy was changed, and the government told the people that now we are parity or even better than the US in international visibility. Now we will publish in Chinese. So, and existing theories can't explain that one of the planets or one of the countries that were once peripheral grow bigger than the center itself, and now it's not just bigger but leave the system. So now China is building its own research infrastructures. They use, like Web of Science is the international, but now they have the Chinese national knowledge infrastructure that is very similar to the Web of Science, but it's in Chinese. Of course, they have an English version, but that this is limited. Approaching this database is not easy. So for me to analyze the Chinese production in AI in the Chinese national knowledge infrastructure, I had to contact with 100 universities, asking if they have access, because it's super, not just, it's not a lot of money, but the overseas access is different than the Chinese one. So I needed the Chinese institutions, but they can't give the data abroad. So we are totally blind what is happening in China right now, because in key disciplines like computer science, generative AI, we cannot see what is happening because we don't know Chinese. We can't have access to the Chinese research infrastructure, and yeah, this is a totally alternative universe of science. And they also have different AI. In China, using AI in research is forbidden. So it's, the regulation is stricter than the American and the European. But what is totally forbidden is using Western AI. So Chinese researchers now couldn't work with researchers who work with ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity. And in China, it's not like in Europe. So you can imagine if in Europe I lied about, and I told my university, okay, I used a little bit, they will say, but in China you go to the prison, so it's not the same stuff. So if you are Chinese researchers, most likely you won't work together with a Western researcher who uses Western AI, but everybody uses that. So now the collaboration between China and the Western world is diverging because everybody uses that in the Western world, but for Chinese researchers it's forbidden to work with anyone who uses Western AI, and you can check it, especially in social sciences. I don't know if you use DeepSeek. No? You have to. So it's open source. It's the Chinese version of ChatGPT, but especially in social sciences, it gives you totally different answers. And many times it says that, sorry, let's change the topic. This is something that never happens with ChatGPT. Because it has several filter mechanisms, the training data in which DeepSeek learned how to produce the answers is totally different. So you can imagine that the silence is diverging because the Chinese version of AI, and they have a lot, not just DeepSeek, all the universities, Chinese universities, has their appropriate versions of AI that they use, and they have totally different data. So that's why the answers will be different. Maybe not in mathematics or astrophysics, but in social sciences for sure, and also in medicine. Because in China, you know, Chinese medicine, the traditional medicine, is part of science. In the Western world, no. So in the Western medical journals, you can publish anything that is connected with Chinese medicine. In China, yes. And in China, it is like a justified way of science. So if you do medical research in China and use the Chinese AI, you will have results that is based on Chinese medicine. That is unacceptable in the Western medicine. So it's not just computer science or social sciences, but also medicine that is a key discipline. Chinese way of knowledge is diverging to the Western part. And now China has its own education test in which they measure the level of knowledge of the students when they apply for Chinese universities. So now they are focusing on different indicators that the Western, like the SAT test in the US, they used it for decades in China, but now they use their own specific tests that are focusing on different indicators. So what is happening in China is they are building a totally different version of science, and remember that China is the most productive country right now. So it's not like a little part of science, but maybe the biggest part of science now is totally different than our science. And I don't know if you will ever learn from Chinese textbooks, but I would say if you learn from Chinese textbook, your knowledge would be totally different. And I would say that this is not a legitimate way of doing science. I just say that this is a totally different way, and the conception of a global, unified, international knowledge now it doesn't have any meaning, because we can see that in a very important part of the world, that is Asia, they build a totally different system for research infrastructures. This is just one example that now China publishes 8 times more papers in the Chinese infrastructure than in the international databases. We actually can't have access to 80% of the Chinese knowledge in generative AI or in artificial intelligence in general. So this is something that we don't know the results right now, don't know the future, what will happen in the world of science. So these are just some closing questions about the future of science. I don't know the answers, of course. So what will we learn? What textbooks we will use? It's not easy to just send students or researchers to China to ask what they are doing. So it's the riskiest part of my research is that I need ethnographical research in China. And I already have many partner universities, because without strong partnership, you just cannot do that. And if you don't do ethnography, you won't say reality, because scientometric data tells you something, but what actually happens in China, you can only observe. And for that purpose, you need ethnography, anthropology, and so all the quantitative methodologies to really understand what is happening. Because I often say that there are many methodologies in the science. So there are objective one, like statistical analysis that is objective, but you won't understand anything. So you have see correlations and stuff like that, but how to interpret? There are interviews, but I'm actually very sure, because I did a lot of interviews in the Hungarian academia, that they won't tell the truth. So interview is something that people say. Okay. But ethnography is something in which you can really explore what is happening. And it can be a totally different stuff than the stuff they tell you in the interviews. So what we will learn is just a question of empirics. So that's why I would ask you to check your textbooks, the authors, the sources of the text, and students 10 years in the future can also check their textbooks. If there will be a difference, if we will have more authors and authorities, more papers and textbooks from different world regions, or we will stick to our Western scholarship, that will be more and more limited. So what I learned about China, I wouldn't say that this development will stop, because they have the money. It's a very different story, China, because in Shanghai the pollution was very, very high, and then the government told that from next Monday you can use only electronic cars, or you go to the prison. This is something that you can't do in Europe. In Europe, you might say that in 5 years, slowly, we want to change, because it's impossible to tell the people that from tomorrow you cannot use your normal cars. This is something with the research. What the government tell the researcher, it will happen next day. In Hungary or in Spain, if the government told you that from tomorrow you have to focus on artificial intelligence, you can say no, sorry, it's not my field of research. But in China, if they say you have to focus on artificial intelligence, tomorrow you have to learn everything about AI on your field. So if they focus on something, they can develop. And now, because, yes?
I want to know if you approve the Chinese policy or not.
Okay.
Do you approve the way China is managing the AI?
Yes, yes.
Because it's the way to protect themselves from the US domination of knowledge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because
they send the people in jail, but it's the only way.
yeah, yeah.
It's the debate on universality of knowledge and the universality of human rights.
Yes, yeah.
It's the way they find to protect themselves. So
Yeah.
what's your opinion?
Yeah, but this is something that we have to analyze, because the Chinese research policy is very changing, and they have a lot of papers. So in my project, actually, we will need computer-based natural language processing analysis, because they have too many policies. So there are policies of the Ministry of Education, the policy of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. There is a different Academy for Social Sciences. There is an association for cybersecurity. So I don't have a very appropriate knowledge on these issues, because we know something from BBC and Western blogs, but what is happening in China is on white papers, and we have to analyze that with more empirical evidence. So this is why we need more research. But what I know from experiences, that is rapidly changing, and it can change in a few months. And this has a severe effect on cooperation, for instance. So this is the riskiest part of my project, because sometimes they won't let you go to the country, even if you have an invitation letter, if you're focusing on artificial intelligence. The next month they want to collaborate with. Now it's a very big opportunity for global South countries, because now China, with the Belt and Road Initiation, want to cooperate with global South countries, because they can cooperate with the United States, or maybe they don't want to cooperate with the United States. and the mainstream understanding of China still thinks that China, so this is the mainstream opinion on China, that they just copy and paste Western knowledge. But right now it's not the situation. So now they have more innovation than the US. So the number I can't remember the word, sorry. The number of patients that were put by China is higher than the number of patients of the United States. So now they are very good in innovations. So I'm pretty sure that the development of China is something that won't stop. The other question is why we will learn at all. This is something that university professors are discussing all around the world, that now even the children that have 6 years old, they are 6 years old, use AI for preparing themselves from the exams or preparing the essays or the presentations.
But in China?
No, not in China. In China, it's very strict. So in Europe, it's strict, but there are no consequences. I think that a lot of parents are discussing with the professors in elementary school, because the children write the essays and the presentations in AI, and the teacher told that it's something that is not allowed, but the parents go to the school and say that no, he doesn't use that, and the teacher can prove. So, but what we think right now is that it's a question of the next generation, because even your generation already knows something. So if you already know something, your cognitive functions are different that the children that I want to be politically correct. So if they don't have anything in their mind, because they always ask the questions with the ChatGPT, we don't know the cognitive consequences right now. Because I also know that I always told my children also to use ChatGPT, because for me it doesn't make sense, and it's not a popular one, so it's a secret. I don't know why they have to know history so detailed, the Hungarian history, all the numbers, the years, what happened in I don't know, 1094. It's just data. For me, it's just data. Why they have to know all the municipals of Hungary with the capital cities? Why they have to know the types of, I don't know, vegetable they produce in different parts of the country? I just don't understand why they need all this information. But what is sure, that they need some information, but I don't know which kind of information they need. Because if you don't have information in your mind, I don't know what happens. Because also your generation and the generation of my children, they had to learn something in the school. Mostly bullshit, I would say, but they had to learn something. They have something in their mind. But the generation that born yesterday, maybe they will use ChatGPT from the start, and if all they will have in the mind is TikTok videos, I don't know the consequences. So this is a very big question of education. I'm not a professional in education, but I think it's a very severe question, what they will learn, because they have to learn something, but we don't know the content. Yes?
I don't understand what you say now related to the decolonization.
Yeah.
If a child don't know from where he's coming, his culture,
Yes?
all those elements, the name of his city, the name of
Yes.
the capital, the name of everything around him, if he just have to type on his computer to know,
Yeah.
it's completely crazy.
Yes.
And if you relate that with decolonization, that means that there is nothing that makes the difference between him and myself.
Yes.
Because
Whereas-
he will type where my capital is. Oh, it's Madrid. Madrid or Valencia? And then you have all this, and I can say, and ChatGPT will make a mistake, and my capital will be Madrid. And it's Russian. It's completely in contradiction with the position of decolonization of knowledge. Because the decolonization is also managed by men, white,
Yeah.
North,
Yeah.
and Arasel, if you want to continue with the Sudasana.
Yes. Yes.
And those intellectuals are the decolonization people. It's individual. And you didn't touch some, on my side, I think it's very important, is the individual knowledge. All your perspective is individual. Publication, article,
Yeah.
and you don't touch the collective knowledge of the people. The collective vision of a people, of Amazonia, it's completely different. The cosmology, the way
Yes.
they think the world, and that it's not in the computer and in the database of ChatGPT and so on. And that is fundamental. It's not an individual one.
Yeah, I agree.
How do you see that?
Yeah, I agree,
There's
but
contradiction between the education of a child, that you just told that it's not important for them to know from where they are coming from, because it's that, as you say.
But
And
I have 3 children, and they are, I'm pretty sure that they learned, they have the exam, and they forget. So if they are not living on that word, actually, they will forget. So culture for me is something in which you live, in which you have direct, it's like religion. It's like religion. If you don't go to the church, if you don't part of the community, if you don't understand by experience all the process, for you it will be external. It will be something that you learn in school and forget in the next day. So I totally agree with culture that is a living stuff, but you have to live it in an experience. And when I talk about the future of education, it will be better if the children actually go to that city, live there for a week, check all the mountains, talk with the people, go to a pub. They will have a living experience with the place. But to locate the places on the map, they will forget it the next day, I think. So what culture means for me is a living experience, and this is, of course, and this is why decolonization has right when they criticize when an American professor go to China for a week and then thinks that he knows everything about China. When I do international research, I always work with people who actually live on that country as a resident, as a native one, because he or she understands what's happening. If I go like a tourist or a professor, I won't understand anything. And I think the same holds for education. If they have to learn it as a data, this is not meaningful for me. Of course, if they really live the experience, it's totally other story. So I agree with that.
I wanted to maybe briefly just challenge something that you said in relation to all of this, because you mentioned going back to sort of the Greek style
Yeah.
of education at some point. You were more talking about university kind of style education, but Greek education, you were thinking Socrates,
Yes.
that had like a heavy base of memorization, which is sort of also the thing that you just said. I don't find the usefulness in that, right? But the style of the Greek ancient educators was memorize all of these large poems, like text. It was like very much based on like first you memorize everything and then you reflect on it.
Yeah,
So I just
no,
wanted to
what I,
ask
yeah, it's okay. What I was referring to is the peripatetic way of a more personal way of teaching. So it's not the academic one. It's like the attitude, the relation between professors and the students, because I think it contains a lot of humanity, and I think it's part of our anthropology. So I can remember that I was always, the subject in which I was interested were always connected with the professors. So I don't really like mathematics, but I won several championships in mathematics because I liked my professor a lot. So she was my favorite professor, and I learned a lot. The same with communication. I liked my professor a lot, and I started to investigate his research because of the professor, not because of the subject. So when I refer to the Greek education, I was referring to this peripatetic way of course, it couldn't be the same. So history doesn't repeat itself. So Marx don't have right in that, I think. But I was referring only for this part. Humanity will be, like now the handmade products are more valuable than the artificial ones because it's connected to humanity. And I think we need the same with education. So humanity is still very valuable, and this is something that AI can't reproduce right now. And I wouldn't think, but this is philosophy, it's not empirical, I wouldn't think that AI could replace humanity because it's part of our anthropology. And we couldn't do anything against our anthropology, but yeah, it's part of the science fiction. Yeah.
It goes in that way?
Yeah, it's changing. So a few decades ago, it was China's strategy to go a lot of professors to the US. And then the next generation was the professors who was trained. And the third generation is the professors that learned everything in China. So it was 3 generations when they learned everything about Western science, but it was a slow and very, very super planned stuff, because China always had very long plans, 50 years plans, so it's not like tomorrow. And it's literal 3 generations. So if a country want to do the same, they have to do the same stuff. So first, professors that learn everything that, then the generation that learn from professors that learn that, and the third generation will have the knowledge itself. From the other directions, Chinese professors in the US, now they have a worse position than before. So now the cooperation between the US and China in the academia is not as good as it was 10 years ago. Because they are, many cases, they were investigated if they are spies. It's in the top more competitive disciplines. So they were investigations, the regulations was very strict. Some people should have to go back to the country, but also China in itself is not really international in this time. If you check, we checked it in the Scopus, you can see the internationalization level of different countries, and the Chinese one is not really high. So they are not really international in these terms. They learned everything that they wanted to learn, and then they closed the doors. I think this is what happens with AI right now. They learned everything, and they say, Americans say that their AI is still a little bit more developed than the Chinese one. And I'm not a computer scientist. What I know is that DeepSeek is almost as good as ChatGPT, but the costs are way more lower. So China is very big, and talent is connected to the number of people. Because I say, I'm not racist, so I say that the distribution of talent is equal in all the countries, and if the country is very, very big,
most likely you will have very talented scholars. And if the education system is good, they provide the funds that frontline research needs. So I would say now they even don't really need internationalization, because they are already very visible in international databases. They have universities with the highest ranks. Now they want to change university rankings. This is the newest, yeah. Because the indicators that global university rankings have severe bias towards the Western indicators. And now China wanted to change the indicators, and they can because they have 20 universities in the top 100. And then now they want to focus on different indicators, because rankings are always based on indicators, and who has the power has the right to change the indicators themselves. So it's a very, and it's constantly changing. It was a surprise for the Western world that from 2022, China started to build its own infrastructures. It was something that even the professionals didn't see. Oof, I don't even know. No.
What time is it?
Yeah, it's already 1.5 hours, so I speak too much, I think.
Are there more questions from people connected online or people here in presence? I would like to ask you if what do you think about if I think to the Chinese medicine, I will say that they have a completely different paradigm comparing with our medicine. So listening to you, I was wondering if this new age we are facing now, can this step, if I understood you, right now China is closing the door of production of innovation. So maybe they will be able to create a new paradigm even about how to learn. No? So because I think that I agree with you that right now teaching is not transfer content that is the way we have done till now, but maybe we will teach how to learn, because in the relationship with my students, I see that they are not able to read the text and face the frustration they feel when they reading the first time are not able to understand it. So they are angry with this, and so I think that if I can help them is giving them tips how to go ahead this frustration. It is only an example. So do you think that this election of China to close the door can set a new paradigm in terms of knowledge production? Production and transfer.
Yeah. I think I don't. So I'm not in China study. No, it's not in China study. What I know is that it's totally so in Europe, and I'm very happy with this. We are focusing on students as people. And we are more and more focusing on the well-being of the students, to be happy people. And I don't think that in China this is what's happening. They need China as a whole culture and country to be successful, and they kind of use the people to be able to fulfill that. So when I read Chinese policies, sometimes they talk about the well-being, but they always like well-being, but not as individuals, but as a social class. So if they, I can imagine that they can came up with a very good education strategy in order to make professionals that will be very useful for society, because it's kind of a different way of thinking. For me, I want to be happy, and I want to have my family happy. I think it's a very Christian to have your neighbor, like I don't know the exact word in English,
Relatives.
to relatives happy, and then make it more broad. So if you are happy, your friends will be happy, your family, your neighbors, and then your country. But China, it's a little bit the opposite. So first China, and then the people. So even if they will have a very good practice for educating very professional people for given positions or jobs, I wouldn't be happy if we want to apply it for, because I think what happens with humanity is, I think there are several key features that won't help. So everybody wants love, everybody wants to be in love, everybody would want to feel him or herself good, happiness, and so on and so forth. And all the other stuff is just serving these purposes that I think it's very European to aim for happiness and individual freedom and have a fun and so on and so forth. That is not as important. I talk with a lot of Chinese people, and some of them even don't understand this way of thinking, because they are educated in a very different way. So this is why they are exploited in the Western world. So I had a friend in Cuenca when I lived there who had a shop, and he will actually never in his life, he was never in a holiday. So all week, all the time in the shop, which is totally frustrating for me, even imagine that, but for him it was normal.
Normal, yeah. Okay. I come from China, and I'm delighted to see that you have such a good understanding of my country, Professor.
Oh, thank you. Very kind. I'm not a China specialist, so I just...
Is it possible for you to share the screen with us? Oh, so sorry. But
we can send, no?
yes, we can. We will upload the recording of the seminar and the PowerPoint too.
Yes,
if you let us.
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
So we will share contents that way. You know. Okay. My question. We can. Okay. We don't see the screen. Oh, sorry. They told us at the beginning, but well.
Okay.
But I think that the more interesting input you gave us was in your tales and your narrative more than in data. If we want data, we will check your papers. Okay. Any more comments?
How you started and introduction of you and your experience in education system and all that. Could you tell us some advices about how to make our first steps in that system, in that academic system of education and everything?
Yeah, so we tried everything. So we did workshops, I wrote a book about science strategy, not working. So it's also, you need somebody who know how to do that. So with my PhD students, we write a paper together on my research in which he helps me or she helps me. The next one is his or her project in which I help him or her. And if he is clever or she is clever, next time it's free to do it. So you will actually need someone, a living person, who has an experience, who have success in that, and you have to work together with, because this is why in my office we have mentors. I have 5 mentors who work hand in hand with the scholars that want to publish, because all the subjects are different, all the journals are different, all the methodologies are different, so there are no general rules. You will need someone who is able to do that, and then it's easy, because it's strategy, it's rhetorics, it's methodology, so it's not, you don't have to be very exceptional to be able to do that. So half a year, you can learn everything you need, but you need someone who can actually help you. And yeah, we tried everything. We tried workshops, never work, conferences, books, because this is something that you can't learn from a book or a workshop. You need an individual mentor, in best idea if it's your supervisor, and it's easy if you have someone that can teach you. If no, for me it was 5 years, because in Hungary there were no one that could teach me. I had to teach everything by going to the wall many times, and it was very, very, very super slow and annoying, a frustration. My mental health is. But if you have someone that can tell you what to do, it's more easy and more fast. So it's something everyone, all my mentorees could publish their papers, because it's something that you can do if you find the right journal, if you find the right way of doing research, if you find the good questions, you find the good topic. It's nothing. Frustrating, because many times the first journal won't publish you, but the second, yes. So you have to be patient, you have to do yoga, and that stuff. So one thing, I have to do a picture, but you can do that like my mis hijas siempre hacen esto. So if you don't want to be recognized, you can put your hands over your face, but I need.
If you want, I can take the picture.
One for me.
We can three pictures.
Yeah.
One to them, one to you, and one all together.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
To the people online too. Yeah.